Hey Callo community, this is your host, Hannah Kirkpatrick. Today I'm sitting down with Panchi Simeto, creative executive at Orion Pictures at MGM Studios. Hi Panchi, how are you today?
Hi Hannah, I'm well, how are you?
I'm good, thanks for sitting with me. So talk to me, we're here at the MGM offices. What is your place here? What do you do? I would love to get a breakdown of your role.
Yeah, definitely. So I am the creative executive at Orion Pictures in our film group. We are a small but mighty team of women over at Orion. We really operate as a specialty division of MGM. So we fully finance and distribute feature films theatrically at the moment. And what's really exciting about our group in particular is that we focus on working exclusively with filmmakers that have been historically underrepresented in Hollywood. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun. We're a little bit of still a startup, I would say, in that the group launched in 2020, late 2020, under Alana Mayo, my boss. And, we have, including Alana, 3 executives in our group, and we've been just busy building our initial slate of films.
That's incredible. So can you share what you're currently working on? Are you allowed to say that?
Definitely. So we are in post on our first 3 features right now that we produced, which, thank you, has been really exciting. They're all, we love to say we're like genre agnostic because they're all very different. But all very authored. So each of the films, I feel like, is very much the kind of brainchild of the filmmakers behind them. So, kind of chronologically, the first movie we came on board was Billy Porter's directorial debut, which is very exciting. That's called Anything's Possible, will be coming out this year. It's a really beautiful, life-affirming high school story. It's really, really adorable. Very much Billy's version of what a high school looks and sounds like, and it's actually a love story as well. It's the star of our film is an amazing actress who she's a Black trans woman, and she falls in love with our lead actor, who is a cis teen boy, and it's just a really I think sweet look at that kind of relationship and first love and
how the complexities of that too, with 100%. Identity playing into it too.
Exactly. And then, very different tonally and genre-wise, our next film was Sarah Polley's movie called Women Talking, which is a beautiful adaptation of a stunning book as well by Miriam Toews. And Sarah herself wrote and directed the film. It's with our amazing partners at Plan B Producing, along with Frances McDormand, producing and starring with Claire Foy, Rooney Mara, Jessie Buckley, Ben Whishaw. Very, very stacked cast. Yeah.
That's good.
So that was, it's a beautiful story and a kind of intergenerational story set in a colony of Mennonite women. And it's actually based on true events of a group of women who had been sort of gaslit and abused in the colony for years. And our story takes place as they are gathering together and deciding their fate as a group. So they're deciding if they're going to, stay and fight these men, if they're going to stay and forgive them, or kind of go out into a world they've never known. So that's, yes. Wow. Yeah. And it's, again, just, much more of a kind of grounded film than Billy's, but very much still, authored, to my point earlier, of, feels like Sarah's unique take on it, which is lovely. And then our third film that we shot last year was Chinoya Chukwu's next movie, who Chinoya, for those who might not be aware of her, is an amazing Nigerian-American filmmaker. She won the Grand Jury Prize at Sundance a few years back for her film Clemency with Alfred Woodward. And she is tackling the story of Mamie Till Mobley, Emmett Till's mother.
Wow. Heavy. Oh, my goodness.
So very heavy, but, part of why Chinoya really wanted to tell this story is to really honor Mamie outside of just the events that happened to her and that experience, and talking about sort of this whole constellation of people who galvanized around her and the bravery of her decision to, have an open casket funeral for Emmett. And it's very poignant in that it's like a character study of Mamie. And you stick with Mamie the whole way through the movie, and it's a beautiful homage to her. Wow. Yeah.
Those sound incredible.
Thank you. So those are our first three, and then we have we also acquired Gerard Carmichael's directorial debut at a Sundance last year. So part of what I do is both across development and acquisitions of finished features.
Did you always know that you wanted to get into this, even as a child? My dad always says, he's like, growing up, he's like, what's your thing, Hannah, in terms of your passions or interests career-wise or even just in general? Yeah. Were you that kid that always liked film and television?
I was actually more of a theater kid. I grew up, so I was born in Los Angeles. My parents are both from Montevideo, from Uruguay. I moved there when I was little. I did all of elementary school in Uruguay, and then I moved to Buenos Aires, to Argentina. I did middle school there, and then my family moved back to LA when I started high school. So I grew up moving quite a bit and moving schools, and I was always just drawn to theater throughout it all, since, I was in, a Music Man production in, first grade or something, and then,
Did you perform in that as well, or were you more of
I did. I was a performer growing up, but then as I got older, I started more just, I think I always loved storytelling, and I wasn't quite sure how that would fit into my life, but I knew I wanted it to fit in my life in some way. And as I got older and I got to college, I really started, still exploring that in terms of hobbies and classes I was taking. Right. And that's where I started to more find the intersection between kind of theater and film and TV within the community there. I went to Harvard and graduated in 2017, and I studied history and literature while I was there and did a minor in economics. But
sheesh, that's impressive.
Yeah, I took enough classes, and then I was like, I actually could do an econ minor. Great.
Might as well, right?
Yeah, squeeze that in. But really, when I studied history and literature, again, a lot of what it was looking at films, looking at books, poetry, art, photography, just kind of the literature broadly defined of the time, and in that way analyzing the historical periods. And I just thought, I started to see the pattern of how film had such an influence in culture and in these massive moments, like the way film can both be sort of a mirror to society and also something aspirational, Definitely. And so I just started to get really obsessed with that, that power of movie as a cultural footprint. And so really I was very lucky that early on in the series of internships I did, I was able to get an internship at a company called Marc Platt Productions, and Marc produced, Wicked on Broadway, and at the time was working on La La Land, and, doing all these amazing musicals and crossover a lot with theater folks and playwrights and composers into the film and TV space. And so that's where I learned about producing and how to be a producer. And once I saw Marc and Adam Siegel, my boss over there, in action, I was like, that's what I want to do. Definitely. So that was kind of where I fully committed to the, film development, film executive track.
It sounds like you had people around you that very much inspired that change from production to now creative executive. Yeah. How did you feel in that? What was that moment like?
I do feel like it was once I did land at Marc Platt Productions and I started actually working in the process of, from seeing things from development, meaning, meeting with writers, directors, hearing pitches, hearing ideas, reading books, finding the right partners for it, packaging things, and then seeing that process of not just, okay, how are we going to finance this and the logistics and everything, but then, creatively seeing it through and being a creative partner there to the filmmakers and being a real champion for them. And so I loved that process. Like, I love reading, I love giving notes, I love, I'm very firmly, an executive who will allow the talent who actually are the talented ones to do their thing. But I love when I do actually maybe have, a suggestion or a tweak here or there that can help and, just sort of help guide folks through the process. And it really was, my experience working those, almost 4 years there at Platt that I went from being an intern to being an assistant to first 2 executives there, then to Marc himself, then becoming a creative executive at the company, that I really got to see our films through development, production, post, and kind of see that whole
operations behind it, which is so important, because sometimes I feel like people just, if you're able to make that jump, it's so great, but you miss out on all of that experience of understanding like back end stuff, processes.
I always kind of give the advice of, staying at one place long enough at least that you can see a project all the way through. That way you get to learn, every step of it. So I was really lucky in that sense.
And so, that change from Marc Platt to now here at Orion, like, considering, I guess, the community around you, like, did you have a mentor or who really, helped pioneer this next step?
In terms of mentorship, I was very lucky at Marc Platt. I consider Marc one of my mentors, as well as Adam Siegel, who's a very close mentor of mine, and they always really championed me, bringing me into rooms early and sort of giving me those tools to also become comfortable in expressing my opinion. I think that was something great that they did for me early on. And then, funnily enough, Marc actually was president of Orion back in the day, back in the 90s. So it was a really nice full circle moment to get his support for me to make this move to Orion. He was, really proud because he himself, ran this studio once, and, it was kind of a full circle moment, I think, for both of us. And then now I'm just incredibly blessed and lucky to have both Alana Mayo and Gabby Canton, who work with me on the team, who have been incredible mentors in terms of being 2 women in the industry and seeing them having worked both across production, on the studio side, on, across more entrepreneurial opportunities, across, their very, amazing careers, both at, really big studios like Paramount, Warner Brothers, as well as, Alana's stint with Vimeo, with Michael B. Jordan's company. Gabby has a background in independent financing as well, is really savvy about the world of film acquisitions. And, I think I've learned so much from both of them. And they, it's really inspiring to also work with 2 women who share the same hunger I had for championing different types of voices in Hollywood, which is really not the case within the studio system in particular. So to get that out of a traditional studio, I think has been an amazing experience.
When you guys are building a community within itself then too, it's to be able, I feel like whenever I've been able to connect with people, especially in my career, that have the same moral values.
It's incredible. And I, when I met Alana early on, I said to her something along the lines of, I was just very happy that I was meeting someone like her this early in my career, because it historically has taken women to find a fellow female mentor, someone who's as established and doing things the right way that I felt morally aligned with kind of so early in my career was actually very moving for me and
motivating too, because it's okay, I can do this. I have people around me that are here for me.
Exactly. And I would be remiss also not to bring up our amazing assistants, Priyanka and Annabelle, who are also executives on our team and just the absolute best.
I want to know too, in terms of, these people that are prominent figures in your lives, like, was there a specific moment that helped you recognize the importance of relationship building and how necessary it is in collaborating with these people?
I've worked with, writers, for example, that I met, back at Platt, and would champion them to, like, give them thoughts on a project that I was like, look, I don't even know if this is for us to produce, but you're someone, I have a dear friend and collaborator, Kion Hersey, who's, a composer, writer, very just incredible talent, multi-hyphenate. And a lot of times we would just spitball ideas about projects, and I was like, I don't even know if I'm going to be involved in this in some way, but creatively I'm so behind this, and I love this idea, and, this is who you should go pitch it to. Definitely. Here and there, and, and then now we're trying to find ways to, obviously work together here at Orion. So, things kind of come full circle, but I also think often some of the best stuff has been even
swinging it and seeing what
like just sitting with folks and kind of spitballing ideas.
Well, that is an element of collaboration too, because it's you don't know what could come of it.
And I would say the way we also just run our kind of group very flat in terms of, like, again, everyone's sitting around a virtual table at the moment, but and just, talking ideas, who's good for this project, who's good for that. Our core Orion group is very close like that, and we are all instrumental in that process of, packaging things and being a lot more, I think, producerial for a studio, but really finding ways to collaborate, and I'm never really kind of on my own, like, just iterating on things. It's a very collaborative process.
I love that. And when you're sitting, at the virtual table, what are elements that, you guys look for in terms of creative cohesion and being able to bring people into the room? You touch on, supporting and amplifying, like, women and BIPOC people in the community. What other, areas or elements that, you find important?
Yeah, we really do look holistically at all of our projects, and especially in terms of, like I was saying earlier, being a incubator of sorts for talent, and so it's a matter of identifying people that we want to work with, finding the right idea. Often it's an original idea of that person that we want to just get behind because we are really excited about what they're doing. Sometimes it's like, oh, you know what, I read this book and actually I think this would be perfect for this particular writer, director. And so it's like sending it over to them and seeing, if they spark, that kind of thing. So it can come about several ways, but it really is looking at folks who we are excited about championing. And so, for example, more recently, we also are trying to branch out into podcasts too, because we've realized, like, the barrier to sort of entry into production there is obviously lower just than our traditional features that we finance that are roughly in, like, the $5 to $30 million budget range. And so, a podcast is something that's a lot more easily doable. And that's a way that we can still work with some of the talent that, we are really excited about, we want to help along the way, and this is maybe a bit of a more cost-effective way of getting behind them.
Absolutely.
And then seeing if that podcast can have a different life, even if it's not, as a film for us or anything, but again, like,
in some
maybe it's a TV series for one of the MGM groups or another different studio, but it's really about kind of getting behind that person anyways and helping them put some form of art out into the world. So we're really thinking outside the box in terms of formats that we are also financing, and have talked about, certain projects doing live captures of theater shows. We've talked about,
You are sourcing these collaborators as well. How do you do it? Do you do it through social media? What form of or platform?
Really, I mean, everywhere. Industry-wise, there's obviously an existing ecosystem between representation and studios and production companies and, folks coming to us through more traditional channels like that. we have first look deals with producers and things come in through them, and, our relationships really around town. But it's also a lot of, working with folks across, the film festivals and working with programmers and tracking, filmmakers early, folks that, maybe have just been, were accepted into a lab and are workshopping their first script and kind of getting to meet them early on, and on the come up, or, folks who have done music videos and might be looking to expand into something more narrative and more comprehensive. It's looking kind of anywhere and everywhere a little bit. Chris Mercado is a writer-director that we're very excited about, and we're working with him on one of his next features. And, Chris came out of the world of kind of stand-up comedy, directing stand-up specials, and also just has a great background in animation, and, is such a kind of visionary creative, and didn't come from the more traditional kind of, making a short film, going to film school, that type of background.
I want to know, too, in terms of what's next for you, in terms of collaborations, and are there people or projects that you're dying to work on or work with? Yeah. Tell me more about that.
Yes, that's such a good question. There's certainly I could say a very long list of people that I'm excited to work with. Like, just off the top of my head, I'm like Mariama Diallo, who just had her feature at Sundance. This beautiful movie called Master, very excited for. I've been a long time fan of Lulu Wang. Working with Chris is truly like a bucket list item for me, so I'm excited to be working with Chris.
Goals.
Yes. There was a beautiful film that came out a few years back called The End of the Century that a filmmaker, Lucio Castro, made, that I am hoping to someday find something with Lucio. So it's funny, like my creative process, like sometimes it comes about like that, where I'm like, okay, I want to find something with this person, so I'm going to try to find something that targets their sensibility and look for it. But at the same time, I have things like, I'm personally on the hunt right now for like a female stoner comedy. Yes. So that's hopefully next up for me. Yeah. I just think we're long overdue for
like Cheech and Chong, but this like generation.
Yeah, like a, Pineapple Express, something fun, but we just really haven't seen it from the point of view of like women, and particularly it'd be awesome for it to be, women of color, and just the fact that the genre, and also, I mean, the whole issue with, marijuana, folks, people of color are still being incarcerated for this, while, like, other comedians who are more privileged can get away with sort of making jokes about it, but we've never really been able to see that, from a different point of view. Yeah. And I just think it'd be very fun. I love comedy, and I love quirky, sort of left-of-center things. So, sometimes it's things like that. I'm like, I'm just kind of on the hunt for that. And so, there's different ways that I come about my ideas, but I think that the piece that always unlocks them, though, is, okay, well, who's going to ultimately write and direct this? Right. And finding that synergy, exactly.
Thank you all for listening today. Once again, this is Hannah Kirkpatrick, your host. Be sure to visit our website at wearecallo.com to learn more about what's to come.